Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first Bourbon Talk in over 6 months. It's been too long. Drinking Redwood Empire tonight, for the record. What is it? Pipe Dream? Pipe Dream. Good stuff. It has been way too long. We can talk about that. First of all, cheers. I haven't done one of these in a hot minute for a variety of reasons. They beat me up sometimes, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I'm never really sure if people want to do this, but I will say that I started doing these bourbon talks. I want to say back in 2020 during the pandemic, and I did them out of everything from loneliness and wanting community to wanting to get together in one place and sort of talk about what was going on. And over the course of those 4 years, I have come to feel like this is something of a gathering spot for us to come together as things get particularly hard. Over the course of hosting Bourbon Talks, we went through the pandemic where millions of people died needlessly. We watched capitalism swallow itself and double back onto itself. We watched the invasion of Ukraine, which is still continuing and is shifting and changing in ways I'm not sure that a lot of people were necessarily going to predict. We have seen the politics of this country move and change in ways that I would say are unpredictable, but they've been incredibly predictable. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do this tonight and why I would like to do more of these in the near future as 2024 comes into full focus. The reason is because if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you have a decent idea of what is going on. You've heard me talk about it. You've heard others like me talk about it. And as these things have developed, you haven't been surprised. Maybe you've been disturbed. I have as well. But how long have we been telling people that Donald Trump had dictatorial ambitions and that the people behind him were more than happy to make him a dictator in order to carry out their authoritarian agenda? We've told people that for years. When I went on live on January 6th, 2021, I did this with my partner Nick on the Muckrake podcast. I said we told everybody this was coming. We said exactly what was going to happen, and hell, here we are. We listened as a bunch of people who are paid exorbitant salaries to predict things, to understand American politics. For like, where the hell did this come from? How could anybody have predicted this? Meanwhile, we all knew exactly what was going on. We knew that it was coming. As it unfolded, we were no less horrified by it, but at least we understood why it had happened. And here we are, 2024. First of all, Ron DeSantis, what a race he ran, my friend. Best of luck in your future endeavors. We'll cover this more on the Muckrake podcast tomorrow when we record. But man, what a calamitous political campaign. And what an absolute bootlicker to the very end. He waited until the last few weeks to go after Donald Trump and criticize him, and then immediately turned around and endorsed him like a loser, like a dork, like a bootlicking dork. But here we are. We're watching Donald Trump consolidate power within the Republican Party. We're watching him not just become the presumptive nominee, but as of right now, depending upon what poll and what the temperature of the country you're paying attention to, he seems to be the front runner to become president again. And as that is happening, and we'll talk more about this, we have some questions about it. My God, do we have a lot of questions? I think you all miss these bourbon talks quite a bit. So just to let you know, if you've never watched one of these before, I have a bottle of booze. I'm gonna hang out and answer all these questions. So, we got a ton of them, and they're good, and we got a ton of topics that we gotta get into, and, these things tend to be pretty free willing, so, we'll see what I get into and where we go, but I'm in it for the long haul. I hope you're here to hang out. I've got the AFC Championship on pause, so nobody ruin that for me. Don't let me know what's going on. Whole point is that as Donald Trump is becoming the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, and as he is currently probably the favorite to become president after this election, his expressions calling for total immunity for the president, total power, talking a lot about how it's like you need to give police just total immunity so they can do their jobs. And yeah, they might misuse it every now and then, but that's necessary if you're going to have an effective presidency and if the country and its people are going to be safe. This stuff has been so predictable at every step along the way. And I want to say, as always, for anybody who's just coming across this, I hear all the time that people email their friends and their family the links to these things in order to give them an introduction to deeper, real politics. Donald Trump is a symptom of a larger problem. He doesn't wake up in the morning coming up with these plans. He doesn't have these legal theories that he's writing about on legal pads. There's an entire apparatus around him that is paid for by some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in this country in order to forward their own agendas because Donald Trump makes for a hell of a battering ram and a puppet. So we're not talking about Donald Trump per se. And we have to at some point talk about him and his peccadillos and all of his messiness. Like that's stuff that we have to get into in order to understand politics and what is happening down on the political base level. But this stuff has been cooked up for years. I have told people for years to follow the money, look for all of these think tanks and institutes and these programs and these networks that are being funded by all of these wealthy right wing donors who have already undermined federal oversight to the point of almost non-existence and created this Mad Max style neoliberal hyper capitalistic environment. Those people are pushing this stuff. Donald Trump just happens to like it because he is instinctually a fascist. We told everybody they have their papers out, they have their books out. Listen to a podcast that they're on, for Christ's sakes. It's all there. They've been telling everyone who would listen this is what they wanted. The point is this, and before we get into any of these questions, I want to make this the first declaration of this live stream. We are in a bad situation right now. And I've told everybody on these streams before, I've told everybody who will listen to a podcast, who will read a book of mine, who I've ever talked to when you've been in line to meet me at an event. I'm not going to sugarcoat this stuff. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, don't worry, Robert Mueller's got it. Don't worry, Jack Smith's got this stuff. Don't worry, Fannie Willis has got it. Everything's going to be fine. I promise you. There's a plan. Grab your popcorn. It's going to be a thrill to watch. That stuff is a grift. It's a manipulative grift. I understand that this isn't fun. I understand that the stuff that I cover and the stuff that I've been talking about over the past few years isn't fun. I don't enjoy it. I have an interest in it because intellectually I want to understand this thing, this threat that we're facing. I have every interest in that. I understand that this isn't going to make you feel necessarily better, but don't you want to know what's actually going on? Do you really want to pay somebody your hard-earned money for them to tell you a lie in order to make you feel better? And to keep you from doing the things that are necessary in order to stave this thing off and make a better future for yourself, for your kids, for your friends, for your communities, for the entire human species? This isn't fun. It's rough right now. There is a dread. It's like a cold. It's like a pneumonia. There is a dread right now. And I have to tell you that that dread is hard earned. It's real. But you have a choice. And the choice is this: you are either going to look at what the problem is in its face and you're going to make it better and you're going to live a better life and you're going to feel better and the people you love and the people around you are going to feel better and the world is going to feel better, or you're going to ignore it and fall deeper and deeper into the abyss. And I have to tell you, you deserve better than that. We all deserve better than that. And we can have better than that. This situation is so complicated and so multifaceted. It did not take the last 8 years to get here since Donald Trump came down that escalator. Again, he is a symptom of a larger problem. This storm has been rolling in well before you were born, well before your parents or your grandparents were born. This stuff, hey, read the Midnight Kingdom if you want to learn about it. This stuff has been boiling and boiling and boiling for centuries. It reaches a boil every now and then, and you have to deal with it. You have to choose a future direction. We're there. May you live in interesting times. Congratulations, you were born at a hinge point. There are tons of hinge points, but this one is a big one. And so, as we get to these questions, as we talk about this, we need to talk both about what is going on, how it happened, but also how we can get past it and what you can find on the other side of this. The subjects that we're going to discuss tonight, and again, we have a hell of a lot of questions, and they are really, really good, and I can't wait to dive into them. But every question about what has gone wrong is a silent question of what could go right. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's what we have to deal with. This bullshit where we are pretending that this isn't happening and we're paying a premium so someone will lie to us in a reassuring voice, give us all the memes that we want, all of them. Oh my God, the Cheeto is on the run. Don't worry, the walls are closing in at this point. Entire industries have rose up out of the ground to make you feel better about something that you should be terrified of, that you should look at and say, I don't want this and I want something different. So that's what we got to talk about tonight. And we're here. The reason I decided to do this is because if we're going to deal with 2024, if we're going to deal with this mounting crisis, we might as well deal with it together. So yeah, it's hard to get on a live stream. It's a weird thing to get all of the components together. It takes a lot of energy. It beats you up. And on top of that, like my own, I'm sure that you all have this. There's like that little self-critic in my head. It's like nobody wants this, Jared. Nobody wants to talk about this. Leave him alone. I have to move past that. I want to get on here. I want to talk about these things and be honest about them because I care about them. I care about you. I care about your families. I don't know your families, but I care about them. And they deserve better and you deserve better. So if we have to go through 2024, we might as well ride it out together. So this is me saying, here we are doing a bourbon talk, the first one in 6 months. We're going to start doing more of these. I'm not going to let another 6 months go by. We're going to take this seriously and we're going to do it together. So let's get ready to do some questions here. I really appreciate you all coming through here with the questions. They're fantastic, and I love having an audience who thinks about this stuff and wants to know about this stuff and takes this stuff seriously. So thank you for that. Okay, first one, Linda. I've missed your bourbon talks, and so I'm so happy you're doing one tonight. Lately, I have felt like I am living in Vichy France during World War II, with the Democratic Party being collaborators with Republicans and too many people acting like good Germans. I don't know if this is an answerable question, but how do we get people to understand that just voting isn't enough? Holding officials accountable for their actions and inactions and demanding better and being critical is imperative. Our system is so broken. As a senior Floridian, I feel abandoned by my government and fellow Americans. Yet what's happening here and in other states is a menacing foreboding for the rest of the country. Thanks for letting me just spout off. Looking forward to the bourbon talk tonight. Thanks for all you do. Now, one of the things that happened with World War II, and America did this, right? America needed to create, as the hegemonic power, its own narrative and its own story about how we arrived at this place. And you love a hero's journey, right? America got into World War II. We didn't even want this fight. Pearl Harbor brought us in, and then we had to go in and kick Nazi ass and eventually make the world safe for freedom, right? Here's the problem. America inspired fascism and inspired Nazism and didn't really have that big of a problem with Adolf Hitler or Benito Mussolini. In fact, our major cultural centers celebrated them. All you have to do, hey, if you're bored tonight after this bourbon talk, make a little note for yourself. Just go look, see what the New York Times said about Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini before World War II. They were laudatory. They were excited about them. They were so excited that there was a lawgiver, to take care of these things over in Europe and like really put things to right. The point is this: fascism, Nazism, authoritarianism, these are ever present threats. They are not just limited to Europe in early and mid 20th century. You can find them in every country. You can find them in every geographic location. You can find them at every point in history. This is a problem of the human condition that we have to overcome. That's first things first. So when you look at Vichy France, Sartre says, I looked around Paris and I realized that the horror was that people were comfortable with Nazi occupation. Every single day they chose to live in it and they were comfortable with it. We have to understand that not only are we dealing with an authoritarian movement in this country, MAGA, Christian nationalism, some neo-Nazism, these things are all wrapped up together. They're not necessarily one and the same, but they do travel together and they do link together pretty regularly. Not only are we dealing with this giant authoritarian movement, we are also dealing with a complacent population that will either accept the authoritarian agenda or welcome it. That includes a lot of people who have already identified themselves as never Trumpers. These are people who would just be like, "Oh my God, Trump is disgusting." How could those yokels possibly support Donald Trump? They hated what he said. They hated his performance. They hated his entire thing. Well, guess what? They are more than fine with the agenda that he represents. This is why you pick up the New York Times or the Washington Post. Maybe you even turn on a CNN or an MSNBC and you're like, wait a second, why are you spending so much time demonizing gay and trans people? Wait a second. Why are you saying that black people and people of color should probably just, quiet it down a little bit, right? I mean, CRT, am I right? When they say those kids on the campuses, like they're really, really dangerous. And you look at this and you say, what is going on here? What is the disconnect? And you even go onto Twitter and you say, New York Times, what the hell are you doing? Why are you promoting Trumpism? Why are you promoting Christian nationalism? Why are you giving these people the benefit of the doubt? What's happening? And let me tell you what's happening. Deep down, whiteness, privilege, class, we can tick all these boxes down. It costs nothing to say platitudes, to put up a sign that says, in this house, we believe in science. In this house, we believe love is love. And by the way, like some of those people do believe those things, or at least they think they believe those things until they're put to test. What Vichy France showed us, what occupied territories showed us, what we need to learn from Nazism, fascism, authoritarianism around the world is that a lot of good people are totally fine with it. And look at these mythologies that we always play around with. We just had Martin Luther King Day. Martin Luther King's entire legacy was twisted and perverted and contorted into telling people, by the way, the civil rights movement works, so you don't have to worry about taking care of people of color anymore or inequality. Everything's fine. But also, it hides the fact that Martin Luther King himself said the biggest danger was the white moderate. the white liberal. Why? Because they'll tell you to your face that they believe in equality, they believe in progress. And what are they interested in? They're actually interested in pushing their own agenda, empowering and in profiting themselves. They don't want to say that. It feels bad. Oh my God. This is one of the reasons why a lot of these people go to therapy. It's like they're like, oh my God, I feel so bad about what I'm doing on behalf of capitalism. Well, don't worry about that. That's one of the things I'm writing about in my new book. It's incredible how these people suffer their neuroses because they want to be better than people who are exploiting and hurting other people. But you got to make a living. You got to pay for your cars. You got to pay for your houses. Oh my God. Listen, do I believe in public education? Absolutely, I believe in public education. But listen, my kids, I don't know. I just want the best for them. And maybe right now they need to go over here and they need to do that, which, by the way, is an argument you can make. But if you're not going to stand up and fight against the people who are destroying public education, aren't you complicit in what's happening? There is no ethical behavior under capitalism, but there sure as shit is more unethical behavior under capitalism. So, what we're dealing with right now, and I'm really glad that this question got asked, what we're dealing with right now, and if you haven't figured it out, it's time to wake up and see it. The things that you thought were leftist, the things that have been sold to you as the liberal media, all of this stuff, our politics is so much different than what you have been sold. These people have a track record of carrying out this behavior, accepting authoritarianism, just embracing it, letting it come, and just being like, I don't like it very much, but here we are. And it helps them. They think it will help them, or they're too afraid to put their reputations on the line. In America right now, with what is going on, this is really good. In America, what is happening is that a lot of us see the problem, the writing on the wall. We recognize not only are our asses on the line, and you better believe I think my ass is on the line coming in November of 2024. All of us critics who have our heads above the sand, we know what is on the line. If you think that's not something we discuss, you're out of your mind. But you know what else we're worried about? We're worried about the gay people. We're worried about the trans people. We're worried about the people of color. We're worried about the Muslim people. We're worried about all these different groups that are going to get the boot of the authoritarian agenda on their neck, and they deserve better. The children, the old people, the poor people, the people who are in the crosshairs. You can worry about yourself. You can worry about what's going on in your life. But guess what? You don't defeat this stuff by shoveling other people into the maw of it. You cannot defeat this thing by surrendering to it. You cannot defeat this thing by giving into it. Vichy France is a warning from the past. And there are different arguments to make. Going back to the question that was asked, there are different arguments to make. One is the selfish argument. You cannot escape this. You can run from it. You can pay a premium to get away from it for a while. You can do all kinds of things that you think might keep you from being chewed up and spit out by this thing. In fact, some people might even think that they're going to make money off of it. The answer is that they will not. The people who are going to benefit the most from this are the 1% of the population that have roughly 97% of the wealth. Okay? My guess, unless Coke is decided to do something with this Sunday night, unless Elon Musk, and by the way, maybe he is, I don't know, maybe he's all amped up on ketamine or something. I don't know. My guess is that nobody watching this is in that 1%. So if you need to make a selfish argument to people, believe me, your back is going to get broken as well. But guess what? You also need to recognize that there are people out there who deserve your empathy, they deserve your care, they deserve your support, because we are not isolated, we are interconnected. And speaking of COVID, we should have learned it from that. Speaking of the financial collapse in 2008, we should have learned it from that. This lesson that we are all one and we are all interconnected should have been learned a long time ago. And there are people who are working their asses off and spending billions and probably trillions over the years, if you actually want to count this up, who spend unbelievable amounts of money to keep you from believing that we are all one and we are all interconnected. That's how you make the argument. You make the selfish argument or you make the human argument. I happen to think the human argument is better. John asked, I've been giving a lot of thought towards waking people up to the threat that the authoritarian GOP poses towards us. One question I'll be working on is this. What mechanisms will be used to transform the executive branch into a dictatorship, assuming the current Supreme Court and divided Congress? Even if both Congress and the Supreme Court unite, what actually stands in the way of an unhinged dictatorship or dictatorial executive branch? So, I got bad news, and I hate to say this because it's necessary that we have this conversation. I assume that you all, unless you're like 5 years old, you all have a working memory of the first Trump administration. The Democratic Party folded in front of Donald Trump like a wet paper bag. And if you talk to strategists and consultants from that era, and I even talked to a couple of the sitting representatives from that era, they thought it was great to let Donald Trump do whatever he was doing and it would hurt his political fortunes. And as a result, the Democratic Party was going to benefit. By the way, they weren't wrong politically, but as human beings, ethically and morally, dead wrong. Dead wrong. They have sacrificed so many people. Which, by the way, Ron DeSantis down in Florida, who has done more to hurt people of color, gay and trans people, and to set back the rights in a major state. I love that we now can look at him and say, what a failure of a politician. I can't believe the Democratic Party thought it would benefit them to let him take over Florida. And he absolutely has. And they have allowed him to do it because the Democratic Party thinks that the radicalization of the Republican Party is good for them politically. So why would you stand up to it? And on top of that, they kind of agree with some of the things that Donald Trump wants to do. And they always have. Because the Democratic Party has been largely taken over by corporatists, neoliberals, people who are more interested in profit and power than they are the fates of the people. Doesn't mean all of them are like that, but my God, there are a lot of them. They don't agree with what Donald Trump says. And in fact, the Democratic line has been to say, I really feel bad about what the system is doing right now. My God, if I could change it, I really would. Can't change it. Sorry about that. I'm really sorry that I can't do anything about it, but what am I going to do? That probably should be the Democratic Party's slogan. What can I do? So no, I don't think Congress is going to stand in Trump's way. And do you know why else I know that? Because Congress hasn't done a damn thing to stand in a president's way in forever outside of one thing, investing in social programs. They'll give the president the military they want. They don't even stand up against the president when they go ahead and create a war that hasn't been authorized. That's like one of the few things that Congress has over the president. They're not interested in doing it. Whether it's Biden bombing Yemen, or it's Trump bombing wherever, or it's going to war in Iraq and continuing on the war on terror for 20 years. Congress isn't interested in standing up against the president. They are there to serve their donors and the people who basically own them. That way they can continue to be in office, or they'll go ahead and leave and serve on a corporate board. That's what they're interested in because the donors have completely and utterly taken over Congress and taken over our politics. Now, so I don't think they're going to take over it. Supreme Court has been totally stolen. So if Trump does manage to win another term, I don't see Congress or the Supreme Court standing up to him. I mean, the Supreme Court, I've said this on the podcast, the Republican Party hates Donald Trump outside of its base. They really want to be done with him. I wouldn't be completely shocked if the unelected life term serving Supreme Court does something to keep him off the ballot. So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. The smart money's on them saying he can run for president. But I don't see them stepping up to Donald Trump. They're interested in giving him whatever he wants. and because he represents an agenda of the same people who have stolen the Supreme Court. That's where things actually come together. It's not the he was impeached. The new impeachment doesn't mean anything, unfortunately. It's lost any and all power. It's become political theater. I mean, he'll be impeached 3 or 4 times if he gets a new term. Won't matter. It won't stand. Nothing will happen from it because the entirety of the Senate and also the Congress is a minoritarian institution. Hell, the presidency is too. It was designed that way. The founders did not want democracy to take root. They wanted white, wealthy people to run everything, so they created an entire system that, by the way, could be turned into a dictatorship with just a little bit of elbow grease. The whole point is this: no one's going to save us. No individual, no party, no institution. All these things are made up. This is here. We're only on question 2, and we're already getting deep in the weeds. All of this stuff, all liberal democracy, government, representation, reality, all this stuff is completely made up. It's lost all of its gravity, so it's lost all of its meaning. There's a reason why Donald Trump's lawyers are standing in courtrooms and saying he can assassinate political opponents. It's a political theory. It's a legal theory. People can say, "Oh, that's ridiculous." Still a theory. You can fly the flag up the flagpole and see if anybody salutes. But yeah, nobody is going to push against this except for us. That's it. We are unfortunately going to have to create something that stands in the face of this. It's not going to be the Democratic Party on their own. The Republican Party, it's sure as hell not going to be them. Our institutions are minoritarian, serving white wealthy men. Guess who are pushing this? White wealthy men. Democracy is the check against the minoritarian rule that is currently taking hold. That's it. And by democracy, I don't just mean going to the ballot boxes in November. You have to build something else. You have to push back against this shit. Dictatorships don't end because people wake up one day and they're like, you know what, I don't want to be a dictator anymore. Or because institutions rein them in. It's because people push it. They put their thumbs on the lever. That's it. We have to do this. Do I want to do it? No. Is this how I want to spend my life? I am 42 years old. I never thought that the end of my 30s into my 40s were going to be spent dealing with this. And now I look at the writing on the wall and I realize I'm always going to have to deal with this. This is the legacy that we have been given. It's the mission that we have been given. We didn't choose it, but we better take it, and we better do what we can with it. And what's more, that is not only a dire warning, it is an opportunity. This entire system is abusive and oppressive and exploitative. It isn't worth the paper it's printed on. We can make something better out of this. Doesn't mean that we have to have radical revolution. We can have democracy again. We can make a better country than the one that chews us up and spits us out. The country that says that children should be working in slaughterhouses and factory floors, that we all need to cobble together 8 to 9 jobs to try and make a living without even saving for retirement, where people can't even afford to buy houses anymore, where we have hundreds of thousands of our brothers and sisters and fellow citizens living in the streets because we have corporations and algorithmic push hedge funds that are gobbling up every home that is supposed to be owned. It's dire, but it's an opportunity, and we better well take it. Chris says, "Hey Jared, glad to be back at the bar for another bourbon talk. Cheers. I was hoping you could get into the weeds on some things for me. I have 2 questions that are somewhat related and that they both center on the shitstorm that is our current election cycle. 1, Trump has all but laid out his plans to become an autocratic dictator on day one, and for some reason, people do not seem to take him seriously. I'm used to the mainstream media doing this, but to see people who lived through Trump making all the things he said do a reality say he'd never go full fascist is not filling me with confidence. This is particularly true with the vocally online leftist. My question here is how can we convince more people on our side that if Trump wins, that's the ballgame for democracy? Two, the answer to Trump is not a civil war to just hold our breath and stomp our feet. It is, as you have said, grassroots reform and change. My question then is how can we better explain this concept to the people who aren't paying attention or slept through their civics and US history classes or have no desire to learn about this? What are some, for lack of a better term, concrete examples we can point to? Keep fighting the good fight and take a shot of bourbon for me. I'll take a shot at the end of the hour. Okay, a couple of things in that we need to get to. First off, the reason why people can't accept what happened with Donald Trump and what could potentially happen with a new Donald Trump presidency and or what happens after him is because they are living in an alternate reality of American exceptionalism and conventional history. It is a conventional history and a mythology of American exceptionalism that tells them why they have what they have. It keeps them from wondering about their own privilege, who they have hurt, and whose pain they have taken advantage of in order to get where they are. It's they can't see it because they can't see it and they don't want to see it, and it would almost destroy them if they actually did. As a result, they look at January 6th and at first they're like, "Oh my god," and then the next minute they're like, "That wasn't actually that bad." When you talk about the online left, you're not actually talking about a cohesive leftist movement. You're talking about a lot of people who don't have stakes in politics because they say you can't do anything about politics. It's an ironic detachment, which is what absolutely hinders the quote unquote online left. Yeah, they got excited about Bernie Sanders, but the moment that fell apart, they were like, nothing could possibly be done. It's actually funny to think that you can change politics. And so as a result, they make fun of all the people who are actually involved in politics and have some skin in the game because they had their hearts broken and they can't possibly ever try and love again. That's what's going on with the online left. They're too cool for school. They're hidden behind too much ironic detachment. I can't do it. I can't fit in with that group. I don't want to fit in with that group. I think a lot of them are very smart. I think a lot of them have a lot of good points. And I think a lot of them could play a huge role in trying to turn this thing around. But you can't do that by being ironically detached. And there's really no way to talk to them about it. There's no way to talk to them about it, to be honest. You can find common cause. And I think some of them, if a movement actually did start up, could possibly find themselves on the right side of it. They get excited from the sidelines about these things. The pro Palestinian movement, Black Lives Matter. These things have both been populated with the people that they love to laugh at the libs, the resistors, the never Trumpers, you name it, the people that they love to throw rocks at. They might join it if it starts to grow, but that's not where the energy is going to come from. If you need concrete examples of how a democratic movement can actually change things, recently, Chile gives a wonderful idea of where it comes from, which is important because that's where neoliberalism got its start after the Chilean coup. Take a look at Chile. But if you want to make it American centric, which a lot of people do, look at the progressive movement. Listen, progressives had a lot of problems. A lot of problems. And there was a lot of racism, a lot of sexism, a lot of xenophobia, you name it. But what the progressive movement showed was this: multiple special interest democratically pushed groups could make a difference and could change the consensus in the United States of America in ways that most people couldn't even possibly imagine. Oh, okay, you want to get more contemporary? Go to the social revolutions of the 1960s and 1970s. Civil rights, the feminist movement, the gay liberation movement, the free speech movement, decolonization. When people get fed up and they demand better things change. What we have to convince people of, and this is a weird thing, This is a thing that you wouldn't think actually needs to be done, but it does, particularly in America, which is based on the opposite of this. You have to convince people that they deserve better. One of the biggest issues that we have in the United States of America is that we have come to internalize the tenets of neoliberalism and believe that we do not deserve better. We are selfish, we are ugly, we are wicked, we are disgusting. That's what American capitalism has taught us. That's why we have to buy all these products. That's why we have to keep making all this money, improving ourselves financially, economically, in our careers. Why we have to constantly go out and hurt other people is because we do not believe in ourselves. We do not believe that we are fundamentally decent. And if you do not believe that you are fundamentally decent, you're not going to advocate for a better world. You are going to sit there and stew and marinate in the shitty world that you have been given because secretly and sadly and tragically, you believe that you deserve it. That's what American capitalism and neoliberalism and right wing thinking and religion, for the record, have given us is a deep seated belief that we do not deserve better. We don't deserve, our children don't deserve better. In fact, what is happening in the United States, and this is part of what I'm writing about in my new book. What is happening in the United States is that Republicans and other people associated with them are arguing that children deserve to have as bad lives as their parents did. They deserve to have the abuse. They deserve to suffer. So what happens is it's a cycle of continuing on these things because we don't believe we deserve better. Because deep, deep down, in order for this economy, in order for this political system to continue going forward, we have to believe that we are fundamentally flawed. And as a result, we do not deserve clean drinking water, clean air, roads, schools, a safety net that keeps us from living on the streets. The right wing is composed of people who hate themselves. They do not understand it. They hate themselves and they project their hate of themselves onto the rest of the world. And they fight the rest of the world as if they are demons because they believe that they themselves are demons. That's as simple as you can make what the right wing is. Period. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you come to understand Donald Trump and our political system. Next question. Scott, if Haley wins New Hampshire, what are the ramifications? So first off, I think Ron DeSantis dropping out, he was polling around 5%, maybe 6% in New Hampshire. And by the way, I love that he just immediately licked Trump's boots. Incredible. Like, if you look at the numbers, you move them around a little bit. I don't know if Haley can beat Trump in New Hampshire. But I do think that if she were to somehow or another pull off the upset, I think our news media, newspapers, cable stations, you name it, the think pieces and all of these, online magazines, I think that they would be like, Nikki Haley is in this. I think she can still beat Donald Trump. They would go down to South Carolina, and he would probably drum her in the state that she was the governor of. If I had to put money on it right now, I say Donald Trump takes New Hampshire. Maybe he doesn't, but Nikki Haley cannot beat him. When I was in Iowa, and if you haven't seen my reportage from Iowa, go over to Dispatches from a Collapsing State. I was talking with a member of Haley's staff. It was still really bizarre that he wanted to talk to me and give up the farm and telling me what was going on. The Republican Party truly believes their only chance of defeating Donald Trump is if he gets convicted and if he gets thrown off the ballot. That's their winning strategy. Nikki Haley is sticking around because she still has the money, the Kochs and the establishment Republican machine, who took away all of the money from Ron DeSantis when they realized he was a loser. They took their money from him and gave it to Nikki Haley. She's going to have money for a while, but these are not people who are going to continue to fund a losing campaign. They'll all suspend their campaigns and hope that Donald Trump will go to prison and or he'll be ruled off the ballots. But yeah, right now, there's no way forward for Nikki Haley. That's just not going to happen. Blake, How realistic do you think it is that Donald Trump would choose Tucker Carlson or another media personality as his running mate? I think that's a distinct possibility, which actually is really funny because Tucker Carlson has been shown that he he hates Donald Trump. He despises him. He thinks he's disgusting and stupid. But Donald Trump would love to take somebody who said that because Donald Trump actually wants somebody who sees him as he sees himself. He's a malignant narcissist who hates himself. And he wants somebody who recognizes that. He doesn't really want an ass kisser. He hates ass kissing. He loves the act of someone having to, uh, engage in fealty and humiliation. He loves that. But, deep, deep down, he really, really wants somebody who understands what the game is, right? He wants somebody who can look behind the curtain, understand that he's disgusting, and he knows they're disgusting. I think Tucker Carlson is a real possibility for vice president. I think that could happen. I don't think DeSantis would be. I don't think Ramaswamy would be. I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene would be. Although, depending upon polls in Georgia, I could see that possibly being a swing. I could even see Kemp being his VP now that we're talking about it. Even though Trump has gone after Kemp for a while, but I think he would love to do something like that. But yeah, I think Tucker Carlson is a real possibility for VP. And for the record, Tucker Carlson in a position of power, he would be really, really, really dangerous. Really dangerous. Somebody says yeah, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I could see her getting something like that. Yeah, I could see that. Susie, hi Jared. We've all seen the recent headlines, tweets, and outtakes showing Trump essentially derailing his own train of thought. Is it really him aging or dementia or a clever ploy to evade jail time under an insanity plea? He seems quite capable when discussing immunity, but can't distinguish between Nikki Haley, his former ambassador, and Nancy Pelosi. No, I think he's in decline. But this isn't going to be like one of those things where I'm like, don't worry, his brain's bad, everything's fine. No, I think he's in decline, and I think that's real. The reason why he's having a hard time doing that, while in other times he's not, the Nikki Haley, Nancy Pelosi thing, if you actually want to break it down, he confused Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi because he thinks they're both disgusting women who stand in his way, right? That's who he is. He goes ahead, the nasty woman perspective. I think he sees Hillary Clinton and Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi as basically the same person. Uh, in terms of being clear about immunity, that's because he's not the one thinking about this. This is a legal theory that's being put in place by the lawyers and the think tanks and the institutes behind him. This is the stuff that's being pushed on him as he's walking out of the curtain. He's not thinking about this stuff. Like, this is a script. And you'll notice when he starts talking about this, most of the time, he's doing it off of a teleprompter because it's what they want him to push, because he is the best messenger for his base to accept authoritarian agendas. That's what he's there for. That's what he's doing. All right, I have two related questions here. We have a lot of questions tonight. I'm really glad before I get to these two. Really glad we're doing this. This is nice. We're gonna start doing this more regularly. We're not gonna go 6 months without doing this. Doing this again. This is enjoyable. I enjoy hanging out with this group of people, and all of your great questions. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope this is treating you well so far. All right, we got two related questions here. Hayden, my dad is a Republican, and we agree on nothing. He says the Democrats are helping inflate Trump's polling numbers because they think Biden can beat Trump. I don't know why anyone would be so sure that is the case, but wondered if you'd heard this and what you think. Secondly, why does the Biden camp seem either unable or unwilling to improve their strategy and messaging when his approval rating is so low? Paul says, why are GOP governors continually being allowed to ship migrants in liberal cities with impunity? Who's responsible for letting it continue to happen? It needs to be stopped, or they'll keep escalating until the presidential election. Sickening. So these both sort of have the same related answer. So first things first, no, I don't think they're inflating the poll numbers for Donald Trump. I think he does lead Joe Biden in a lot of key states. Um, The Biden campaign can't change because, first of all, Joe Biden is a very hands-on politico. He has no interest in letting his people leave the White House. He wants them there. He wants to be the president while running for president, and you have to separate those two things. They have to be two different operations, and he is not into that. So in this case, he's not allowing his campaign to breathe and do anything else. And on top of that, like they don't have the right team in place, nor do they have any sort of a strategy. They have no story to tell. What is the Joe Biden story? I saved you from Donald Trump and I'll do it again. Okay. Well, how have the last 3 years been? Are you offering me more of that, or are you offering me something different? Well, MAGA Republicans threaten American civil liberties. Cool. I love that you're talking about that. How are you going to fix it? What's the plan? Are you going to codify Roe v. Wade into law? A woman's right to reproductive care? Because I haven't heard you say that. What are you gonna do about the disenfranchising of people of color in the South? Oh, you haven't told us that. Only that you are going to stand between Donald Trump and that. Well, guess what? You can't do that unless you have a mandate, and you're not gonna get a mandate unless you give us some sort of an idea of, 1, how you're gonna do that, and 2, what does a future with a Joe Biden second term look like? They haven't communicated any of that. And the answer for why that hasn't happened has to do with exactly the answer to the second question of why hasn't anybody done anything about these Republican governors like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott sending immigrants around the country? Because the Democratic Party isn't interested in a fight. They have no desire to fight. Because, oh my God, if you fought, you might be seen as radical. And on top of that, they don't care about this. And I'm going to say something that isn't popular, but it's no less true. The reason why we have a quote unquote border crisis is because both parties want there to be a border crisis. The people who fund every single party in this country benefit from an immigration crisis. They want there to be a ton of people that they can go ahead and pay less than minimum wage with no benefits in order to do jobs that Americans want a minimum wage for and want benefits for. They take advantage of these people. And on top of that, like it's really great to have these people because, if you're not happy with your conditions, I don't know, maybe we might have to talk to ICE. Oh, you're suddenly happy with your conditions. Oh, okay. I just want to make sure. That's great. We have an intentional quote unquote underclass in this country because people want to exploit them. So as a result, nobody wants to do anything about this. The Democrats will talk tough about it every now and then, when they want to appeal to moderates. The Republican Party will use it to scare the hell out of their base to keep them, voting against any actual interest. And what actually occurs in all of this is that the Democratic Party has absolutely no appetite to do anything about it because, 1, they don't really want to do anything about it. And 2, if they did want to do anything about it, they don't have an interest in a fight. That's our condition. It's like back in the day, you would go to a Harlem Globetrotters game and they would take on the Washington Generals, and you'd be like, man, I don't really know if these Washington General guys are really putting up much of a fight. It's weird. It's almost like they all kind of want to get to the end of the game where the Globetrotters win. Because the Republican Party represents the pushing of interest that seem really disgusting and upsetting. The Democratic Party's job is to say, this is man, I think this is really unfair. And I'll tell you what, if you vote for me, I will try really, really hard to do something about it. But, I'll get in office and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things. What? Do we have a parliamentarian now? Oh, the parliamentarian. Oh, the parliamentarian said we couldn't do something about it. Oh, I would love to do something about it. if Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema would get on board. I promise you, we are 2 votes away from the filibuster getting broken. Oh, we have enough votes to break the filibuster? Oh my God, I would love to do something about this, but we just discovered another third and fourth person who wants to go ahead and keep the filibuster and not do this thing. Oh, we wish that we could do something about this. Oh my God, it breaks our heart. I can feel your pain. That's what the Democratic Party currently represents. Doesn't mean that's what they have to represent. It's not what they've always represented. That change happened in the 1970s, 1980s, and it's only gotten worse since then. The point of what I am saying is that any time that something like this happens and you wonder why the Democratic Party isn't pushing back and holding these people accountable, they don't have an interest in doing it. They either don't want to be seen as radical and fighting back, or they don't actually want to fight back. That's a terrible thing to say, but it is no less true. Marina says, my question, what is your take on the worst case scenario during this year and after November, best case scenario, or most likely scenario? Imagination is extremely important given the existing data. Anyway, I would like to hear your thoughts on these complex times. The worst case scenario is that Donald Trump not only wins, but he wins in a pretty strong mandate type election. The idea of Donald Trump winning the Electoral College and also the popular vote would be an absolute nightmare. If the Republican Party also took over the entirety of Congress, that would be pretty bad. That'd be bad. Yeah, that would leave us in a really awful position. We would see a shifting, a pole switching, the likes of which you can never imagine. All of a sudden, we would be really interested in working with Russia and China and really just, aligning with them. His visit to North Korea would seem like child's play compared to what would happen. Also, you would see a Democratic Party that would more or less just go along with everything, recognize where the political weather vane was, and not really stand in the way of them. Meanwhile, you'd see Christian nationalism, the MAGA movement, right wing paramilitarism growing. It'd be ugly. It'd be really, really bad. That is the worst case scenario. Right along with that would be, Trump actually losing and then stealing the election. That'd be pretty bad. That'd be pretty bad. Best case scenario is that over the course of the next 10 months, we see the burgeoning labor movement, the decolonization movement, the anti capitalist movement. We start to see those things coalesce in a way that starts to put pressure on our politics. We have a pretty tumultuous summer, early fall. By the time we get to November, we defeat Donald Trump, but we also see that something has to change. And we also start to see a bunch of people getting elected who will start to buck the system or speak out against it. And moving into 2025, we would start to see a Democratic push, small d Democratic push, that could possibly interrupt the neoliberal consensus. That is the best possible situation. Most likely, I don't know right now. I keep saying this, 2024 is almost unpredictable. We have 2 major wars taking place right now, one in the Middle East, one in the Ukraine. Things are constantly changing. Political violence is on the upswing. I've said it before, I wouldn't be shocked if you came back from the future and told me that either Donald Trump or Joe Biden didn't make it to the November election. I wouldn't be that shocked. So I don't know what the most likely scenario is right now. The only thing I know is the one thing I can be sure of, which is that we have to work to make this life in this country better. That's it. We can't predict things. We can't know things. We have to operate from the perspective of we might not even see the end of this battle. We might not even know where this whole thing is going to lead by the time we pass off this mortal coil. But we can make a difference while we're here. We can be better ourselves. We can heal. We can support and love the people that we love. We can make those relationships better. We can make our communities and our coalitions better. We can bring all this stuff together. And through that, we can begin to change the world for the better. That's the only thing that I know, is that is not only likely, it's essential. And so as we sit here and we talk about 2024, we have to talk about not what we think is going to happen, but what we think we should make, what we think we should create. Not religious, but because of a variety of reasons, I have started to take up the Serenity Prayer as an idea. I'm not praying to God for it, but I do like the idea of knowing the difference between the things I can change and the things that I cannot change. The things that I can change are myself, and I can change the world through myself and my relationships and my organizing and my fighting. And you can as well. That's going to bring us to the end of the first hour of the Bourbon Talk. We still have a lot of questions. I still have a lot of bourbon, but I think that's a pretty uplifting, hopeful thing to end the first hour. And we have it now. It is at 8, 7. Oh, the clock stopped. 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, we're at 8. We're at 8 now. Okay. Cheers to winning that victory. I don't know what happened with the clock. That didn't work well. The clock didn't help us. I don't know what happened there. I just looked up on the YouTube clock and it just got all weird. That's never happened in all of the bourbon talks I've ever done. I've always had a smooth countdown getting to the end of the first hour. All right. Okay, we got a bunch more questions. With wolves, why do authoritarian movements attack women, LGBTQ, etc. first? If men couldn't get emergency room abortions, they'd be shooting up hospitals. You said it. The reason is because authoritarianism is inherently misogynist and patriarchal. There's a reason why these people try and protect white patriarchal men the most, why they use evangelicalism, why they use all these reactionary movements. It's a story, and it's a story that they tell in order to believe that they deserve power over other people. You know? It's literally a means of telling people a story of who should be in control of other people. That's all it is. That's why evangelicalism is so useful to the right. And the entire point of this is to point out that the patriarchy itself is one of the load-bearing walls of this entire system. Capitalism, misogyny, patriarchal power, racism, white supremacy, all of that, they come together and form the framework for this entire thing. And if you want to break this thing down, it means one thing, that you recognize that we're all connected and that we all matter and that we are all equal and that we are better together. And so as a result, patriarchy, racism, misogyny, xenophobia, nationalism, you name it, those things have to fall by the wayside. It is very obvious what needs to happen, which is why this stuff takes the shape that it does. It's always like this. Fascism, Nazism, all of it is inherently patriarchal and misogynistic. And also anti-gay, anti-trans, which was even what the Nazis and the fascists were doing. Jack, hi Jared. I admire your continued hope, but do think it's time to talk about preparing for what's coming. The right has been prepping for years. We need to also be ready to at least temporarily survive a collapsed state. If we do not act now, one day it could be too late. So here's the thing, Jack, and I appreciate the question. If you think that I am not prepping for the worst possible conditions, you're crazy. That I grew up in a rural environment, raised in part by people who survived the Great Depression. If you think that over my shoulder I don't have food storage and around the corner that I don't have some type of a weapon in order to protect myself, you're nuts. I absolutely do. And I do think that people should be prepared for these types of things. And it starts with understanding what's going on. That doesn't mean being a wild eyed, fear mongering, paranoid person. It doesn't mean falling headfirst into dangerous conspiracy theories. It means understanding what's going on around you and being careful. I happen to be hypervigilant because I grew up in environments that were not healthy and were not safe. It's one of the reasons why I can look at this stuff and understand it. It's one of the reasons why I can stare into the darkness and not flinch. I think everybody needs a certain part of that. All of us need a certain ability to at least wrap our heads around what's going on. By the way, someone in the chat, it's Phoenix is risen says it'll be a police state. How to prep for that? It's a great question, and that is absolutely true. One of the things we're dealing with is the creation of a police state, the likes of which we've never seen before, with capabilities and surveillance, the likes of which we've never seen before. Incredible amounts of technology that we've never seen before. The entire thing that we need to do is we need to understand what a police state is. We need to understand what the police are. We need to understand what our rights are as long as we have them. We also need to understand the history of it. Hey, the Midnight Kingdom gets into this. You can understand where that idea of a police state comes from in the first place. Yes, it is no I and Esther Brennan says no idea what a police state even means. It means a place where you have an aggressive police force, law enforcement apparatus that acts as basically an army keeping people in place, which is what we have, along with surveillance techniques that infringe on our rights. And on top of that, not only are there to take out people who oppose it, but to also give the feeling of intimidation to keep people preemptively from opposing it in the first place. But yes, I absolutely believe that people need to be prepared for the worst case scenario. Why? Because I think people should be safe. I think people should have decent lives. Even if the hammer comes down, we need to be prepared. I completely agree with that, Jack. Next up, Joan. Not sure what to think of today's front page New York Times article about Fani Willis and her relationship with Michael Wade, a member of the prosecutorial team in the election interference case against Trump. Allegations are part of a motion filed by Michael Roman, one of Trump's 14 co-defendants. Because it's the Times, guilt is implied and begs the question as to whether this will have an effect on the trial's continuance or outcome. What are your thoughts? I want to go ahead and give you a disclaimer. I do not pay attention to these legal proceedings. I thought my friend and compatriot Sarah Kinzier had a really good article on her Substack talking about how she doesn't pay attention to the soap opera of this law enforcement stuff, and I could not put it any better myself. It has been turned into an entertainment. I got so tired. I'll just go ahead and say it. I got so tired of like the Seth Abramson, like, oh, Michael Wade talked to Patty DeClure and da da da. I hate it. I hate it. And I don't listen, I don't believe in this justice system. I don't believe that a white, wealthy, powerful man is going to be held accountable. And to be quite frank, I understand that our institutions are not only perverted, but they were created in the first place in order to carry out a two-tiered injustice. So no, I don't pay that close attention to them. Would I be shocked to find out that Fani Willis or somebody else in a position of power was corrupted or corrupting? No, I wouldn't. We have to stop making these people heroes. That being said, I don't know. She had a relationship with a guy. I don't know what to say about that. It doesn't seem like the biggest thing in the world to me. So I'm not that worried about it. Do I know that Donald Trump is guilty of the things that he's done? It certainly seems so. It certainly seems like the evidence that I saw in front of my eyes that he did what he's been charged with. But of course, we need to see how that whole thing plays out. But no, I don't. I don't really pay attention to the ins and outs of these things. I don't really. Yeah, I don't really pay attention to it. It's not my scene. I think my time and energies are better spent elsewhere. I got two that go together here. Jessica, hi Jared. So glad to have a bourbon talk tonight. Me too. The Middle East is a tinderbox. It's very scary. You mentioned that things feel like they did right before World War One. My question is, do you think there will be some kind of incident similar to the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand that sets it all aflame? Annie just simply wrote, World War III soon? Question mark. So I'll go ahead and start with this. We might have very well have already seen the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. October 7th might have very well been the spark that sets off the tinderbox. We are already seeing a developing regional war that is beyond the control of the United States or any of its allies. We have a situation where Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and a whole other conglomerate of states have created their own axes of resistance, whatever you want to call it. All of the components are in place. But yeah, there is a possibility that we might see another assassination, a terrorist attack, some sort of a strike that we didn't see coming. Absolutely. These things are really, really likely right now. The person asked, World War III soon, possibly. This is something that I've argued about and warned people about. You look at World War One, you look at World War II, and even if you want to go into the past, you look at the 30 Years' War, you look at the 100 Years' War, whatever you want to do, the Napoleonic Wars, whatever. There are certain conditions that are in place for this stuff to just explode, and they're in place right now. You have America in decline. You have the American hegemonic empire in decline, being completely replaced by neoliberalism. You have economic inequality. You have demographic shifts. You have low birth rates. On top of that, you have like this new economy that's all over the place with artificial intelligence, with globalism being deglobalized. You name it. You know, yeah, we have a lot of components in place for a World War III. And I'm not going to rule it out. And that's not fear mongering. It's simply looking at history and understanding the conditions as it is. It sucks. It really, really sucks. And we deserve better. People of the world deserve better. I always want to like to point out, like you talk about America, China, Russia, Iran, you name it. These are a bunch of proper nouns that denote states, and we're supposed to think about the people in them as our enemies. Every person around the world deserves better than this, than some sort of war that would kill millions and cause untold amounts of damage and trauma. We deserve better than this. But yes, conditions are there for World War III to break up. Absolutely, they are. And I'm just hoping it doesn't happen. Andrea says, "Hi, Jared. I'm a Canadian. Hi. How's it going? And I've been obsessed with American politics for way too long. My question is Canada any safer from the rise of right-wing authoritarianism than anyone else given our parliamentary democracy and constitutional monarchy? My gut tells me no, and I'm quite worried about a character like Pierre Poilievre. I believe I got that right. I don't know. There is an appetite here for sure. Apparently, Tucker Carlson is speaking engagements in Alberta, a political sicko from up north." Yeah, Andrea, I hate to tell you, but Canada, they've got it coming too. It's almost like one of those things where, maybe the movies get here first and then they get elsewhere. Yeah, Canada's going that way. And I feel bad about that. I feel like Canada is behind on this a little bit, but you're catching up. People tell me all the time, like, "Oh, if this happens in America, I'll leave the country." Well, guess what? If this continues to get worse, if this continues to grow, you're not getting away from this thing. It doesn't matter what country you go to. But yeah, you got to make Canada better, unfortunately. Barry says, "What will you do when your Twitter account is deactivated?" It's a great question, Barry. I'm currently still on Twitter reporting behind the enemy lines. It sucks and it's terrible. It's been turned into a billionaire oligarch's personal reality bending machine, which is something. Um, I've been so shadow banned on Twitter that it's unreal. I have over 250,000 followers, and most of them can never even access my tweets, even if they have me highlighted and put alone on a list. I am on Blue Sky, but I have to tell you, I think social media is cracking up. I think what we're watching is the fragmenting of social media. It's going to change. And I think we're going to see a new future where we're going to have a bunch of little lagoons, which is why, I always tell people, go check out my podcast, the Muck Craig Podcast. Go check out my Substack, Dispatches from a Collapsing State. Subscribe to me here on YouTube. When I say that, it's because we need to create these little lagoons where we can be in our little communities, because they are sucking up social media as a major reality and environment. They do it on purpose. They're going to go ahead and make it to where we're not going to be paying attention very much to news and politics. They're going to take away anything that's going to upset people. I knew the moment I logged on to Threads the first time that Meta or Facebook or whatever in the hell they're calling it nowadays, I knew that they weren't going to feature news or commentary or analysis. It was a corporatist space that was safe for people to go ahead and advertise their wares and not deal with politics and the unsettling things that politics brought along with it. So, I'm gonna have my little lagoon. Jake Dunnigan. I'm in a legume. Cheers to Jake Dunnigan. Good people. Always good to see a friend in the chat. But yeah, so that's what I'll do. I'm on Blue Sky for S's and G's. Not really interested in much more than that. So come on over, listen to the podcast, listen to or read my Substack. That's what I'm doing. Holly, hey Jared, I've followed you for many years and I love your work. Thank you. I would love for you to find a place on Instagram too. The content there continues to get more vacant by the day. Anywho, I'm extremely concerned that younger people, 30s and around my age, early 40s, are going to not vote for Biden because of his over the top military and financial support for Israel. I'm more deeply concerned that two major leftist voting blocs, this would be young black people and wellness people, have been nearly lost entirely to conspiracy theory. The last election in New Orleans, which is still majority black, 17% voted, 17, and the state was lost to that psychotic Landry. I guess there's no question here, just misery. I don't see how to get people back once they become so radicalized by conspiracy theory. Feels like the only logical way out is to wait a generation for things to shift, but we do not have that kind of time. Thanks for letting me rant. First things first, I think whenever we start going and talking about demographics as larger groups, sometimes we miss out on larger things. I also think that this was kind of the problem whenever the Democrats were like, oh, look at the demographics. We're going to have power forever. And it was bullshit. That's not how people operate. But when you actually take a look at this, I think a lot of people are going to sit out this election. I think a lot of people are disillusioned with Joe Biden and or the Democratic Party. And in some cases, you have to look at them and say, why wouldn't you be? I got asked the other day by Danielle Moody, how am I going to square my vote in November? And I don't want to vote for Joe Biden. I have been very open about the fact that I do not believe that Joe Biden is the person for the moment. I don't think he's the president that we need. I think that he has been weak on a lot of things. I think he lacks the ability to imagine a future where we can all go and to lead us there. I do not think that Joe Biden should continue to be president of the United States of America. I sure as shit don't think Donald Trump should be. I also think that Joe Biden has shown an ethical and moral lack of leadership when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to how we treat immigrants, how we treat gay and trans people, how we treat people of color, how we treat women. That being said, Donald Trump is a known entity that will absolutely plunge us into an authoritarian nightmare. I'm voting against Donald Trump in November. And by the way, even if Donald Trump isn't on the ballot in November, I'm voting against the people who paid for Donald Trump, who strategized Donald Trump. I'm voting against that agenda. So when I vote in November, I'm voting against those people. And what am I dedicating myself to? I'm dedicating myself to building a movement and something that will push us into a better future, who will demand better leadership, who will create something better. So no, I don't think that when I go to the polls in November that that's all I have to do. I understand that this is a vote that I put into a box on a Tuesday, and then Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning I need to go work my ass off to make the future better where I can choose something better. That's it. That's how I'm approaching it. It sucks. I don't want this. I don't want the Democratic Party to operate like this. I don't want a neoliberal consensus anymore. I don't want to sit around trying to play political games like this bullshit anymore. I think we deserve a better future. Period. That's how I'm operating in this. That's how I'm approaching it. All right. Next up, Deborah. Hey, Jared, I know I'm probably too late in the day for this. You are not. You're getting on the show. But my question is regarding Marianne Williamson. Sarah Kinzier wrote in her Substack, Iowa, whole lot of nothing. No one powerful seems to want to build good things anymore. On your most recent Muckrake podcast, you said you need a president who will wrangle this shit back. You need a strong person, and Biden isn't it. To which Nick responded, so are you saying there is somebody out there? To which you said, yeah, somebody could have. So everything you guys talk about, to me, aligns completely with the words coming out of Williamson's mouth. She's known repeatedly to say that this system isn't going to disrupt itself. Let me in there, I will disrupt it. So finally to my question. I never hear her name mentioned in your discussions, and I'm just curious as to why both the media and the podcast don't even talk about her as if she doesn't exist. I love everything you do. I have your books. I read your Substack and never miss a Muckrake podcast. Thank you, Deborah. I think Marianne Williamson represents more of a cultural leader than a political leader. I think a lot of what is said, whenever she starts to talk about energies or different realities that are possible, I think what she is presenting is a view of the world that begins to skew in a different direction than necessarily agendas and or coalition building. I do think that that type of stuff is useful. I've said before in the past, I grew up in a really, really, really bad evangelical situation. It has taken me a long time and a lot of healing to come around to accepting spiritualism and or spirituality, and here I am. I'm starting to believe in things that are larger than myself. I think that Marianne Williamson approaches those things from a more spiritual sort of a perspective. As a result, none of the political parties and none of the electorate is particularly interested in engaging with her as a person. Um, I don't see a situation in which she could necessarily run for Congress or Senate or much of governorship. But that being said, I do appreciate when people start looking at the reality that we live in and say this reality is untenable, it is destructive, it is abusive. I think that those people have a necessary effect on a system. But I do think that politically, culturally, those two things are sort of divided, if that makes sense. But yeah, I am all for people who say, you know what, this is bullshit and it needs to change because it is bullshit and it does need to change. I got two related questions here. We're getting down to the nitty and the gritty. Aunt Sassy, I'm interested in your thoughts on what No Labels is up to, particularly their interest in the potential need for a coalition government should neither candidate receive the 270 electoral votes. Do you think that's a real possibility? And Dresky says, thoughts on Cornell West or another party? Cornell West, I've met, I've talked to, I've had conversations with. Now somebody asked Bourbon Selection. It's Redwood Empire's Pipe Dream. It's good stuff. I do not think that Cornel West is a serious candidate for president. I think he's doing so in order to make money and probably sell books and or appearance fees, which is unfortunately one of the things that happens in our country now. Um, Third party candidates as of right now are not viable in any way, shape, or form. I wish that we had more than two candidates. I wish that we had a system in which we could have more representation for a variety of views. No Labels is a corporatist party that is absolutely obsessed with either electing Donald Trump and or trying to take over the process for their own means. You should stay as far away from No Labels as you possibly can. Do I think I'll see a viable third party in my life? I don't know. It depends on whether or not we're able to build some sort of a movement and what the Democratic Party does with that movement. These are the questions that we need to consider and, quite frankly, find out. All right, we've got 5 questions left. Jim, will the insurance companies sue the oil companies one day about global heating, or will everything just be reduced to a capitalism casino? Yep, it will be reduced to a capitalism casino. These people are in on the same game. There might be, every now and then, the legal system occasionally turns into just like a little bit of a wrestling match between these people. If they see the opportunity to make a little bit of money, they'll do this. But, the insurance companies aren't necessarily interested in the damage that's going to be wrought. They're interested in limiting their potential damages. So they just will stop, insuring people. The moment that climate change really rears its head, and you almost can't get insurance in California or Florida or basically the entirety of the coast at this point. It'll just keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing until you're not really able to get insurance except for like stuff that they're not going to actually pay you for. So they're not enemies. They're kind of on the same team. They'll occasionally have, some spats here and there, but that's what happens in capitalism. Jake, do you see the GOP calling for another constitutional convention? They need 36 states and are getting close to that total. I think if you saw a muscular Donald Trump presidency or the authoritarian movement start to gain traction, absolutely. There's no reason for them not to amend the Constitution. They had Victor Orban in the country in order to basically tell them how to do it. And as Erica says, they probably won't need it because the Constitution is malleable. They have the Supreme Court. So the moment that they're able to pass a bunch of stuff, they're able to go after a bunch of stuff. They'll just have the Supreme Court, tearing shit up for them. But absolutely, they would happily call that constitutional convention if they could. I don't know that they necessarily will get there, or like somebody said, Erica said, they won't need it. Just thinking, a few questions to pick from. One, what are your takes on mass protest? Any idea? Two, any ideas how to reach persuadables? Three, how do we counter this new level of far right funding? I'll go in reverse. It's not new far right funding. It's always been there. We have to organize against them. We're very, very lucky. Since I gave my last bourbon talk, I've been engaged in on the ground organizing for projects that are pushing back against the far right funding and a lot of the strategies. The good news is that, man, their appeals are really obvious what they're doing, and they're really defeatable, and we can defeat them. So it's going to take footwork, it's going to take organizing. We don't need as much money as they have, and we can defeat them. Two, how do you reach persuadables? Give them an idea for what to do with the future. That's what people are looking for. And it can break the spell of a lot of this shit. It's not necessarily going to end everything, but it's a beginning. And three, I guess it was number one, what are your takes on mass protest? Uh, I like seeing America out there in the streets. And I thought the Black Lives Matter protests were fantastic. And I wish that leadership in Washington, D.C., within the Democratic Party would have embraced it instead of doing gestures like kneeling with scarves or saying we're on your side, but we're not going to defund or change any kind of funding here. Yeah, I like mass protest. I'm all for it. I think mass protests are going to be one of the ways that we save this country, to be frank. Shira, the media sucks. This has been well established. What is or are your go-to for honest, reliable information? I've talked about this on the Muckrake podcast before in a Q&A. I'm not going to tell you any particular site. I'm not going to tell you any particular magazine or newspaper or network because you shouldn't trust any of these people whole cloth. What I have learned to do, and this is something that we lack in this country, unfortunately, is critical analysis. I am able to look at what's going on. I'm able to read the articles. I'm able to read the reports, understand rhetorically why these articles are being written, what is being communicated, what is actually useful here, and what is noise. And so, as a result, if you actually have that, if you can engage in a little bit of critical thinking and analysis, you can look at anything and you can understand what's being communicated. But you first have to develop that. You have to understand, and this takes a long, long time to do. You have to come to an understanding of what has happened in the past, what is going on right now, and where we're going. And once you have that solid footing, it took me writing multiple books to do it. By the time I wrote American Rule, I was like, man, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. Then I wrote The Midnight Kingdom. And I was like, man, I really think I have developed a pretty working understanding and theory of what's going on. Now I'm able to look at all this stuff and start to read between the lines and understand it on a way that I haven't been before. By the way, thanks for the people who've been watching this now for 4 years or reading my stuff for years now. Yeah, you start to learn this stuff and you can read between the lines and you can read anything and you can get your information there, but it takes a while. Lighter last question. Lauren says, non-politics related. It's almost the best time of year. What are your early March Madness predictions? I say this as an Indiana Hoosiers fan. If you told me right now that the Purdue Boilermakers win the NCAA championship, I would not be that surprised. And it's going to suck to see it. Can't wait for the tournament, though. I love it. That's going to bring us to the end of this bourbon talk. We went a good hour and a half. I miss doing this quite a bit. And I want to say before we get going that I appreciate you. Somebody says, what exactly is a Hoosier? The story is that in the pioneer days, that when an Indiana folk would knock on someone's door because of the accent, somebody would say, instead of "who's there," they would say, "who's there?" Hoosier. That's the story. We don't know if that's true, but that's our best guess. And I am a Hoosier. I really appreciate you coming out. I appreciate you continuing to fight the good fight. Like I said, we are in the shit right now. It is really, really hard. and it is really bleak in a lot of ways. But we can get through this together. And not only will we get through it, but on the other side, we'll make something better. I believe that, truly. But it's going to be hard as hell. I haven't lied to you this entire time. I've never said that this was going to be easy. Democracy is hard. Capitalism makes democracy incredibly hard. They want to destroy it. But we're going to continue to do this. We're going to do more bourbon talks. I promise you. It's not going to be 6 months until we do this again because we need community and we need to talk and we need to keep each other apprised and we need to find a place where we can have these conversations. I thank you so much. These things always fill up my heart. They always make me more optimistic. They always make me feel better. And I hope that it did for you as well. And I will see you here soon. And before we go, cheers to a better, more human future. We deserve it. You deserve it. Your children deserve it. Your family deserves it. Your neighbors deserve it. Everybody deserves it. We deserve a better future. Here's to it. Talk soon.